was to give you this letter when election was true. But since Dr. Rowley was stepping down, I figured I couldn't wait. I'm reading it now.
I'm reading it now.
Before it's too late.
Before it's too late.
I hear people say the PNM wasting the nation's time. I hear people say the UNC go scrape every last dime. And some couldn't choose between bad and worse, so I had to write this plea for the next leader of this country.
'Cause we need to see
a nation full of success. We need a leader addicted to progress. Someone who's not here for the money and always giving us transparency. A leader with a clear destination and a direction that what we will see. Most respectfully,
to whom this may be.
Some people say bad politics slowing this nation down. And some people say implementation is where we does go wrong. But I say that they both are true, and that's what we need to see to fix our style of democracy. Some people say this moving world keeps on evolving, and some people say our infrastructure needs some upgrading. That's why I hope this letter you read for these issues to resolve, so sweetie auntie could start to evolve.
'Cause we need to see
ministries that competent. Information you'll get in 10 seconds. Public servants who will answer the phone and give you advice with a pleasant tone. A bank run should take you the whole day. It's time we stop playing. I what we was see. Most respectfully,
to whom this may be.
Baba, 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 I used to play, I was sheriff when I was a little boy. But when I see they arrested Earl, I'm glad my gun was just a toy. It reminds me there are few ways up and 1,000 ways to fall. Life's not just for one, but that goes for all. Many leaders in this land could be guilty or innocent, and it's hard for the people to truly know, so they will judge your intent. So before you walk in that big office, take a look at your character and have a long chat with Almighty Father. 'Cause we need to see power without ego. Take a ride on the bus, let people know. Don't be too much on your high horse, but be confident whenever time calls. Careful how much your leaders put one pot. Them things have to stop. Thy war we was see. Most respectfully,
To whom this may be.
notice this is written in the future tense, with hopes that you are a leader of great poise and great resilience, one who structures TNT with its local policies, not from global powers, but what the nation needs. I'm not going to lecture you on what's right and what is wrong, but I ask you based on the people's needs, keep your ears down on the ground. And don't be like Gillian Bishop and not care what the people think, cause you could still learn from the babes and sucklings. Cause we need to see TNT in the World Cup. Innovation from young people don't stop. A culture industry to hang the emblem high. So soca go stop trying to eat the pie. A leader who strike fear into criminals, that is critical. That's what we was see.
That's what we was see.
Most respectfully,
To whom this may be.
People say our infrastructure needs some upgrading. That's why I hope this letter you read for these issues to resolve. So sweet TNT could start to evolve. Cause we need to see ministries that competent. Information you'll get in 10 seconds. Public servants who will answer the phone and give you advice with a pleasant tone. A bank run should take you the whole day. It's time we stop playing. That's what we was see.
That's what we was see.
Most respectfully,
To whom this may be.
ba 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 ba. I used to play I was sheriff when I was a little boy. But when I see they arrested Earl, I'm glad my gun was just a toy. It reminds me there are few ways up and 1,000 ways to fall. That's not just for one, but that goes for all. Many leaders in this land could be guilty or innocent, and it's hard for the people to truly know, so they will judge your intent. So before you walk in that big office, take a look at your character and have a long chat with Almighty Father. Cause we need to see power without ego. Take a ride on the bus, let people know. Don't be too much on your high horse, but be confident whenever time calls. Careful how much your leaders put one pot. Them things have to stop. That's what we was see.
That's what we was see.
Most respectfully,
To whom this may be.
ba 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 ba. I'm sure by now you will notice this is written in the future tense, with hopes that you are a leader of great poise and great resilience, one who structures TNT with its local policies, not from global powers, but what the nation needs. I'm not going to lecture you on what's right and what is wrong. But I ask you, based on the people's needs, keep your ears down on the ground. And don't be like Gillian Bishop and not care what the people think. Cause you could still learn from the babes and sucklings. Cause we need to see TNT in the World Cup. Innovation from young people don't stop. A culture industry to hang the emblem high. So Soga go stop trying to eat the pie. A leader who strike paying to criminals. That is critical. That's what we was see.
That's what we was see.
Most respectfully,
To whom this may be.
The beauty of the Caribbean expressed in song, poetry, and dance. Helen Francis, the Trinidad and Tobago Calypso monarch for 2025. The new generation, a little bit of soul, a little bit of calypso, even some reggae there. The multifaceted expression, musical expression of the African diaspora. Our gift to the Caribbean, to Guyana, and to the world. After the plantation experience, which said that we are not human beings. We use our God-given talents to say to the world that we are human beings, endowed with all the talents that God has blessed the human species with. To whom it may concern a letter to the incoming Prime Minister, located in Trinidad, but anywhere in our Caribbean. The poetic musical voice speaking for us and to us as we continue this journey to the other side. We're always continuing the journey to the other side because we are always asking questions and we're always answering questions. From the Pacoraimas and the savannas of our hinterland to the riverine areas, to the once wild coast that was stained by the intellect and the labor of our foreparents. We come to the world and say we are here. And that is what we are about. Martin Carter said, to the world of tomorrow I turn with my strength. I come from the nigger yard of yesterday, leaping from the oppressor's hate and the scorn of myself. I turn to the history of men and the lives of the people, the lives of the people. Vincent Alexander is here today after a long time. As you know, we took some time coming out of September 4th to find that balance again and to find that tone that we can continue brick by brick, word by word, struggle by struggle, the journey that must be completed. And we're getting there. We're getting there. So many of you so many of you are still catching yourself. Catching yourself. As always, I come tonight enthused. The young lady in front of here this afternoon, I did stand to go to get some plantain chip, and she greeted me quite nicely. And then I left and went to talk to somebody. When I come back, she's talking to the girl selling the plantain chip. The conversation that she didn't know I was Buxtonian. She didn't know I was Buxtonian. I said, well, if you're from Buxton, you know it's Buxton. She said, I'm from Buxton. I'm married and come to Buxton. I'm from Leg One. And I fall in you all the time, and I never know you're from Buxton. I hear you talk about Buxton all the time, but I didn't know that you're from Buxton or you live in Buxton. And she went on to say, I am APNU. My great grandmother was a PNC. My grandmother was a PNC. And I's APNU. No doubt. And those of us who do this work, we want to hear that sometimes. Because if you listen to the doubting Thomases, you would think that the world is over if you are a supporter of the APNU, if you are in the leadership of the APNU or the individual parties. And it's people like that who tell you that despite what happened, they are standing firm. As I say, you know, there were still 77,000 votes for the APNU. And if you're claiming that Norton was the problem, and so we lost so many thousand votes, you have to give him credit and give the team credit for the votes we got. We are forgetting that. But thanks to that young lady for giving me some more energy to come again tonight and for us to continue our struggle. We got this little struggle to overcome the little trouble, says Bob Marley. Soon we'll find out who's the real revolutionary, because I don't want my people to be contrary. Brother, you're right. You're so right. Sister, you're right. You're so right. It's in times like these we find out who are the real revolutionaries, because I don't want my people to be tricked by mercenaries. Those who for a little piece of silver, or in our case, let's say gold, will stop the struggle. And it's in times like these that we know who is who. Soon we'll find out who is the real revolutionary. You know the story of Bob Marley attending the independence celebrations in Zimbabwe in 1980. We had two honored guests there, you know, at that celebration. The late Forbes Burnham and the late Walter Rodney. Forbes Burnham went front track, and Rodney went back track. But Guyana was so important that we had two of our major leaders at the Zimbabwe independence celebration, and a testimony to Guyana's role in the liberation struggle in Africa. Vincent Alexander was there in Tanzania, in one of the frontline states, that we had two leaders. Robert Mugabe asked Walter Rodney to write the history of Zimbabwe when Walter Rodney was there. But Bob Marley was the signature. Attention, the Zimbabwean government, remember it's coming in, new government, couldn't pay. And Bob Marley paid for the band and the instruments to go to Zimbabwe. And the freedom fighters couldn't get into the stadium. The fight was over, independence had come. The freedom fighters who were fighting in the hills, they were left out of the stadium. I think, the stadium had a capacity to hold about 80,000 people. And they wanted to see Bob Marley, and they broke down the gates of the stadium and marched in to the stadium to see Bob Marley. And, confusion, and some of the security people, they used tear gas and so on. Bob Marley was singing and his band was playing, and everybody went off the stage. And Marley was still there on the stage in his element. And the tear gas didn't bother him. And when the rest of the band members came on, he turned to them and said, it's in times like these we find out who are real revolutionaries. And that song, Zimbabwe, which is perhaps my favorite Marley song. It's difficult to say which Marley song is your favorite. If you were to put a gun to my head and say, choose one, I will choose Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe. Soon we'll find out who's the real revolutionaries. And say, we Africans are liberate Zimbabwe, pulling together the Pan-African struggle. We Africans are liberate Zimbabwe. And as I like to tell my students, the best line for equality that I've heard from the poetic voices, in every man's chest, there beats a heart. The plea for human equality, in every man's chest, there beats a heart. We political scientists will say that we are born equal and all the story that we just use. And the poetic voice says, in every man's chest, there beats a heart. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. As you notice, we have assembled a little bit early so that we can get in as much as we can get in. I saw Sherrod today, and he gave me a ticket for taking over some of his time. And so for good evening, Mary Figueroa, who doesn't miss a Politics 101, and who doesn't miss In the Ring, and who doesn't miss Ben Shop, and who don't miss all the show. Good evening, Mary. You have ownership of these programs. Yes. Welcome to Politics 101, wherever you're joining us from. We have made it to day four. It's a long time since we've had 4 shows in succession. We made it this week, and I think we're going to make 5 in succession. 5 in succession. Those of you who have not yet enrolled for our course, Introduction to Pan-Africanism, which begins this Saturday, 4 to 6 p.m. It's an online course, and we are kicking off this Sunday. Please, the information is at the bottom of the screen there. You can still register for the course. We hope this is the first of these courses that we are going to be sponsoring by Politics 101, because we are always learning something. And again, I had a young university student from K-Ville campus in Barbados, part Bajan, part Guyanese, write me to say, well, Dr. Hines, I'm Barbadian, and I didn't know that Barbados had seceded from the British during the colonial times, and that the Bajan Parliament is the second oldest parliament, and so on in the world. And so we are always learning something, and it's about pulling this all together as part of a coherent, how should I put it, a coherent set of facts and information under a particular heading. Because, you can pick up information, a little piece here and a little piece there. And, if you don't pull it together in one place under one theme, it doesn't make as much sense as if you learn it in an eclectic way. So we are going to be doing these courses. Local government election is coming up. And one of the things I want to do is to do a similar course on local government, because it's very important. And of course, I will enlist the expertise of people like Vincent Alexander, who is perhaps um, our biggest expert on local government. But local government is so integral to our process. We are the country of the village movement. After emancipation, all kinds of things happened. People settled all over the African diaspora. They settled in places. But Guyana is unique in terms of the way we did it and the number of villages. You see, these lands were bought and then turned into villages. It's unique to Guyana. There have been, like I said, similar settlements all over the world, people coming off the plantation and so on, but Guyana is unique. And local government is synonymous with the village movement. And you know, we have what they call low turnout at local government election, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that as a population, we don't always appreciate the importance of local government. Now, I grew up as a little boy. One of my first intervention in politics was as part of what was called then the Buxton Youth Council, which was a collection of all the youth organization in the villages. And each of them sent a representative to the youth council, and the youth council functioned as a youth arm of the village council. And we would go to the village council every second Wednesday, I think it was, and we would ask questions, because those were question days. Anybody from the community could go and ask questions. And we would go there as children, because I think I might have been 13 years old or 12 or 13 when I became a delegate of the Buxton Youth Council. Kwesi and Kofi, the late Kwesi and Kofi, and I'm telling, let me see who else, Colin Gardner, the two of them were, I think, chairman and vice chairman of the Youth Council. And you know, so that was my first foray into politics. And like I said, I think I was about 12, 13 at the time, you know. But in those days, when you go there on the second, and I'm sure it's the second Wednesday, I think I get it right, and you would see farmers going there and asking questions. That place used to be full. It used to be full. I remember John Abrams from the PNC used to be the chairman of the village at that time, you know. And poor John used to get hell from the farmers who were talking about drainage and irrigation. Those are words that, if you're a 12-year-old and you hear the word drainage, makes sense, because you hear it. When you hear irrigation, you say, lad, there's a big word. You go home and get your dictionary and you begin to learn irrigation and drainage and so forth. And I don't think that we pay enough attention to local government, you know, as another entree into government. I know Vincent and others like myself and so on have been talking about a return to the village council, not as a replacement for the NDC, but as another. So you see, if you have village council, neighborhood council, regional council, and then you go up to the central government. What you have there are 4 doors into government. 4 doors into government, you know. So more levels of government is better than less levels of government. But people have to believe that government is working for them. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. I notice South Carolina is in the house, Georgia is in the house, Washington, D.C., is in the house, New York is in the house, New Jersey, all y'all Florida. I see my friend Aubrey Paul is here from Texas. You all populate the whole of America. And my Canadian friends are here. Those of you in the wider Caribbean, welcome to Politics 101. The Caribbean is being tested right now, being tested. Do we continue to have a zone of peace in our Caribbean? Welcome to all of you in Guyana, Vincent has been waiting for quite a while, so let's bring Vincent in. Vincent, good evening.
Good evening, David. Good evening to your viewers.
And thank you. After a long time, we are back.
Yes.
We have quite a lot to talk about, but let's talk to us about the importance of two things that I touched on in my introduction, that I want to get your reflections on. And one is Guyana's role in the liberation struggle in Africa, in particular in Southern Africa. You were in Tanzania, which was one of the important frontline states. And I made the point just now in my introduction that at Zimbabwe's independence in 1980, we had Guyana, two esteemed visitors or guests at that celebration. Talk to us about Guyana's role in the African liberation movement, and as a result of that role, what benefits came to Guyana?
Thank you very much. In fact, I was going to ask you to allow me to mention a recent event. You know, Angola, they are celebrating the 50th anniversary of independence this year.
Uh-huh.
And what they have done is to honor a number of persons who contributed to the liberation struggle in Angola, both local persons and international persons. And the word has come to hand that Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham has been numbered among the honorees by the Angolans on this the occasion of the 50th anniversary of independence. As you know, Guyana, under the leadership of Burnham, played a significant role when we allowed the Cuban planes to refuel in Guyana on their way to Angola, when Angola was under threat of South African intervention and needed assistance, and the Cubans came to their assistance with troops, and they had to ferry them, and Guyana, in the face of objections from the great powers, allowed those planes to land in Guyana to be refueled on their way to Cuba, to Angola. And that was a major contribution to the MPLA in Angola being able to stave off the attacks from the South Africans and other forces, because, you know, at that time, FNLA, which was supported by Zaire, and UNITA, which had a dubious kind of involvement, and supported by the South Africans, were trying to dominate the process of liberation on behalf of those foreign forces. And the Cuban involvement made it possible for MPLA to prevail and for Angola to get its independence under the leadership of Agostinho Neto, the then leader of the MPLA, with assistance from countries, as I mentioned earlier, Cuba and Guyana in particular. And so the Angolans have now seen it fit posthumously to honor Burnham for the role which he played. I have very fond memories of that period because in that particular year, I was in fact in Tanzania, and the college which I was attending, the College of the TANU party invited us to join them in a delegation to Angola for independence. But unfortunately, Mr. Burnham did not give permission for us to go to Angola. And I think he had his reasons why he did that, given the involvement of him in those planes being able to go over there. He didn't want it to appear as if we also had troops of any sort in Angola at that time. So I didn't get the opportunity to visit Angola, although we were invited as guests on that occasion. But Guyana played an important role in African liberation across Africa, be it Angola, be it Mozambique, be it Zimbabwe. We were able to give moral and material support to the struggle in South Africa. And in the case of Namibia, we were very, very active in terms of the UN Committee for the Independence of Namibia. Guyana, in fact, chaired that committee. So we were deeply involved in the liberation struggle because we saw liberation of Africa as a part of the process of decolonization and liberation, which we ourselves were affected by as a former British colony. And we saw it critical that we should have the kind of what we now refer to as South-South collaboration in the struggle for our independence and for our liberation. And in Tanzania, indeed, it was a frontline state, and there was lots and lots of things happening in Tanzania in relation to African liberation. And I dare say that one of the things that used to happen in Tanzania at that time is that the University of Dar es Salaam, the TANI League, used to have Sunday morning ideological classes. And I dare say that one of the main persons who was involved in those theological classes, among others, was Walter Rodney. So we were on the front line even in that regard, in terms of the discourse and the raising of consciousness on the continent itself in relation to African liberation. Many of the people from Southern Africa were granted Guyana passports so they could leave, whether it was Zimbabwe or South Africa, undetected as freedom fighters. So they could leave as if they were regular citizens because they were bearing Guyanese passports. And I do remember even some of them coming to Guyana and meeting with us. I had the honor of having Chikarima, one of the freedom fighters, actually visit my home. So yes, we were very, very integral to the liberation of South Africa. We saw it as an extension of our own acquisition of independence.
Our own acquisition of independence, Vincent Alexander, reminiscing on that period when Guyana, countries like Guyana and Jamaica really fought above their weight. You mentioned Rodney in Tanzania. His famous book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, is really, the basis of it was really a set of lectures he gave to teachers in Tanzania. And that formed the basis of that book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, published in 1974. Rodney himself would go on the front lines with the troops in Tanzania and some of the frontline states and lecture to them on African history. So Guyana really, during that time, it was the time of the New World Economic Order, the struggle for the New World Economic Order, the New World Information Order, I remember, the New World Political Order, and people like Forbes Burnham and Michael Manley really were on the world stage. It's important that we go back there to come forward, especially for our young people who I think are persuaded sometimes to believe that what obtains in the present is what always obtained and what will always obtain. No, We have seen brighter days. We have seen days when the world looked to us small, but powerful. As a Jamaican would say, talawa, me small, but me talawa. Um, and so forth. So every now and again, it's good to look back, because that's what identity is about. What you identify with. Small outposts. But when you think of that generation, the Manleys, the Burnhams, the Dragons, the Eric Williams, the VC Bird, and others, we really played an important. And those were governmental leaders. When you think about the leaders outside of government, the Rodneys, the Franz Fanons, the CLR James, and others, my God, we have given this world so much, so much, so much. Vincent, let's touch a little bit on local government, because local government election is due within a year. We wait until the election comes around, and then people are not persuaded to go out to the polls. Um, uh, and and it comes and it goes. Talk to us, reflect on the history of local government, and why local government is even more important today than it was 30, 40 years ago.
Interestingly, when we talk about local government, there is also a nexus with our African connection. Because in some regards, and I'm kind of fast tracking here, in some regards, when we implemented the regional system with the various tiers of the local democratic organs, and you referred to some earlier, it mirrored what was happening in Tanzania. Because Tanzania also had a regional system with the various levels, started from the very cell level of 10 homes, going right up to the regional level. And so in some regards, when we talked earlier about our system of people's cooperative units, the neighborhood councils, the community councils, the district councils, and the regional council, we were mirroring some of what was being implemented in Tanzania. We were learning from each other. And in a sense, we're saying that given our African being, we were in fact bringing forward the traditions of the continent onto the place that we were now calling home. And so when one talks about the village movement, one could see again a similarity between the way in which people in Africa were organized and the way we sought to be organized after liberation. Because basically in Africa and in Tanzania, where I had the personal experience, the organization was villages, which Nyerere sought to refer to as the Ujamaa villages.
Mm-hmm.
Villages that were key in terms of self-reliance. And that's exactly where we were going in terms of the village movement, establishing villages where we could be self-reliant. And in that regard, self-reliance is also an integral part of the independence struggle. Integral part of the independence struggle in that we were going to be creating our own local economies that would make us independent and not dependent. A movement which, if it were to take over the entire country, would be the basis for the country's independence. And this independence in this instance is not merely political in terms of administration, but economic independence in terms of being able to produce goods and to provide services and not to have to depend on handouts from the colonial masters. So local government really became the basis in many regards of our independent movement, realization of our liberation, liberated from the plantations, liberated from a plantation economy insofar as we were trying to create our own economy, moving in the direction of political independence insofar as we put in place our own management systems in those villages, bearing in mind what we normally say now, that all politics is local. So we were actually practicing at the local level, and most of our politicians, in fact, emerged from the local government system into international politics. So the local government system, the villages were incubators in very many ways. Incubators in terms of the brains that they produced, and I'm quite sure you'll both have a boxing in that regard, in terms of the politicians that they produce, and in terms of the self-reliant disposition of the citizens. And you know, local government really speaks to the fact that people should be able, the people are sovereign, let's start off with that. The people are sovereign, but they can't, in totality, as a total, exercise that sovereignty on a daily basis. But there are some of the things which entails sovereignty that can be done at the local level without the necessary involvement of the central government. And so, in some regards, local government is a part of the exercise of sovereignty, of the people being in charge of their own lives, by them being responsible for the things that are doable at their local levels. It's an integral part, as I said, of our liberation process, but an integral part as well of the exercise of, of sovereignty by the people. And I can go on, David, on
Yeah,
and on
yeah,
this question of
yeah.
local government.
Little tidbits there, and I promise that we are going to do a formal course on local government sometime next year in preparation for the local government election. We are here on Politics 101. Vincent Alexander is on tonight. Vincent, we are making our way into some of the current affairs. But clearly, when we talk about current affairs today in Guyana, it's all premised on the fact that our most recent election had a particular outcome which people are arguing is unprecedented in modern Guyanese history. We make allowances as we get into this aspect of the discourse for what you have argued, and uh, some of us have agreed with you, that the process, the system for the elections itself was flawed. And so the logic, therefore, is that the outcome must bear some flaw. But even making allowances for that, we still have to deal with that outcome that um, uh, was certified. And I'm being very careful here with certification because I know that's an issue at GCOM, which we will get to. But we had an election, the results that were announced, and the government came out of that result had a, if you will, three, some may say four-way race. The one of the two parties that either formed the government or formed the formal opposition in the past was displaced, and the new party is now the official opposition party. Reflect for us, if you will, because everybody's giving their 2 cents on what caused this shakeup in the political outcome of the election. Why did the Win Party do as well as it did? Why did APNU didn't do as well as it did? Why did the PPP not do as well as they predicted? you've been around elections very long, and I'm not asking you here to tell us definitively what were the reasons, but what are your reflections? Because we are still gathering, and I think I'm sure that you are still wrapping your mind around what happened. But what are your preliminary thoughts?
Well, the first observation I want to make is the what may be considered to be the upset in terms of a new party garnering the number of votes that they garnered. And the point I want to make is that from a qualitative perspective, this is not altogether new. From a qualitative perspective, because we know what happened in 1964 when the UF came
And
into
before that, 1961.
and 1961 with the UF on the scene, that initially you had the PPP and the PNC, and then the UF came on the scene, and they were able to garner somewhere in the vicinity of 14%, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
of the popular vote. So that what has happened in 2025 is not new from a qualitative perspective, but it is certainly new from a quantitative perspective, in that the number of votes garnered are far more significant than any percentage that occurred in 61 or 64. But even as that occurred, I think there's a critical observation to be made. We exist in a plural society with three major groups: the Indo-Guyanese, the Afro-Guyanese, and the Amerindian Guyanese. And by and large, the Amerindian Guyanese have been a floating boat, so to speak, sometimes deserted by those who pretend to lead them, like Schumann in 2020, disappeared in 2025. And the Indo-Guyanese voting largely for the People's Progressive Party, and the Afro-Guyanese voting largely for the PNC. And so basically, you saw the two groups voting for different parties. Now in 2025, whilst there was a third party involved, you still, by and large, saw the split along ethnic lines. So that Indo-Guyanese, by and large, still voted for the People's Progressive Party, and Afro-Guyanese did not vote for the People's Progressive Party. So that plurality in terms of ethnicity and its reflection in terms of voting patterns was largely retained in 2025, although the People's National Congress did not get the same quantity or proportion of votes that they may have gotten in the past. And so I think that the election has continued to be an indicator of the plurality, not only from physiology, but the plurality in terms of preference for and or against parties. I think in that context, the analysis has to be done as to why the African Guyanese seem not to have voted for the PNC, APNU in the manner in which they did in the past. And I think that analysis has to be an analysis about the state of mind of the African Guyanese, the state of mind of the African Guyanese. One thing about the state of mind that is constant is that they still don't show a preference for the People's Progressive Party. But they seem to have had difficulties with the PNC, and therefore in bloc went somewhere else where they continue to constitute an ethnic bloc or a sub-ethnic bloc of the African Guyanese. And so I think that what is critical for people who want to do the analysis and for the party that wants to understand what happened is to understand the state, the mental state, and probably the economic state, the general state of the people of African descent that will have them go looking for salvation somewhere else other than the PNC, which has had the opportunity over from the very beginning to be that one place where they looked for salvation. And that is as much as I would like to say in that regard, in terms of the dynamics of the elections, that the ethnic dynamics remain the same, and that the intra-African dynamics changed, and there has to be a search for the answer as to why that change occurred. I get the impression that we have lost.
Oh, sorry. I was talking to myself. I didn't come back on the screen. Thank you, Dave Vincent, for that intervention. And I have to say, I wish we were free all the time to engage in a certain kind of discourse, because I think even here, you and I, people know where our political preferences are, or preference is, as far as parties are concerned. But yet, when asked to deal with larger questions in the party, that I think that we can step out of the party mode and try to offer a dispassionate analysis of what's going on. And I listened to some of the discourses on the other side of the political aisle and noticed that some of our comrades over there find it difficult to step out for a moment from their partisan rim and try to offer a dispassionate explanation and interpretation of things. And I think I don't want to say that one side is more mature than the other side, because people will take that and make a thing. But it's one of the frustrating things for me about Guyanese politics: the inability of our commentators, our leaders, playing different roles simultaneously, because that's what we have always done. We have always had to play different roles. I mean, you were here, you're a political commentator, you're a GCOM commissioner, some would say a partisan man, although you're quick to say that you're not a card-carrying member of the PNC. You are a Padaji, you're Burnham Foundation, and we have always had to play different roles at the same time. But, still have the capacity to give people, as dispassionate as we can, to give people an analysis of things. And for me, I continue to be frustrated over the inability of more of us to do that kind of thing. I always say, I got to know you and Aubrey Norton and some other PNC people, closer, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And I always say, one of the things you can get from people like Vincent and Aubrey, despite the fact that they're PNC, they're Burnham people and so on, is really a national kind of analysis of things, which I don't always get from my PPP friends. And I still have friends in the PPP, but sometimes it's so difficult for them to step outside of the PPP thing and offer even a mild critique of the PPP. We are poorer because of that. Good evening to all of you.
Yeah, but if I could, but in here to see this, I think that difference is also part of the reflection of the plurality of our society. And the plurality at two levels: plurality in terms of the psyche, the difference of psyche of our ethnic groups. And I dare say that whilst there may be an element of the national psyche, that there is still a significant element of ethnic psyche that informs our behavior. And if I may also say that I think the way in which the PPP has been more dogmatic from an ideological perspective, also, as opposed to the other parties being more flexible, also is one of the reasons for that difference. But in any circumstance, is really a reflection of our plurality. And very often I have to say to my African brothers and sisters who say, why can't we be like them? Is that we have to understand that we are who we are because of origins, because of culture, because of socialization and heritage and all of that. And that really we should not be seeking to be like each other. What we should be seeking to do is to accommodate each other because we happen to be in the same boat. And if we don't paddle together, then we'll self-destruct.
Real self-destruct. And I just want to point out that this thing is not ethnic because you have black people in the PPP, Portuguese people in the who behave the same way. They are much more dogmatic than people on this side of the political aisle. Vincent Alexander tonight. Good evening, good night to you, my brother Ashley. Good evening to you, Audrey Brown. I see my friend Stacy Wilson from Ansgrove. Good evening to you, Stacy. It's always a pleasure. You give me up in Buxton, you don't pass through now. You make your money and you pass Buxton foot up and you gone to Ansgrove. We don't see you. Please pass by and see us. Vincent Alexander here tonight. As usual, we are having what the village people said, deep conversation. We're having some deep conversation here tonight. Vincent, the outcome of the election has pushed you and your brother commissioners at GCOM who were nominated by the opposition leader at various times over the last couple of decades into the spotlight. The argument is that we are going to have a new opposition leader, and that opposition leader should have the privilege of nominating his own commissioners to GCOM. You and your brother commissioners on the other side are saying that, wait a minute, there is no law, either constitutional law or statutory law, that says this is so. And to compound the story, the chairperson of GCOM herself has said that she has literally closed down GCOM, awaiting the change in opposition leader. So she seems to be saying that once there is a change in opposition leader, then there is going to be a change in the composition of GCOM. All of this has been flying back and forth. You have been writing letters to the chairperson of GCOM and so forth. Now, there are a couple of questions, and I want you to tease out the questions for us here. There's a question here about the law itself that governs the composition of GCOM. Second, it's a question of whether the court has the jurisdiction here to determine, to interpret what some people are saying the Constitution is silent on. And then thirdly, is the chairman of GCOM, is she in order, in a sense, pronouncing on this matter and holding up a constitutional body based on our interpretation of the law? So there are a couple of questions that I put there. I'm sure there are other questions, but I want you to start off by telling us what is the law that governs the composition of GCOM.
Let me start off this way. A lot of what is being talked about has to do with a disposition which suggests that commissioners are representatives of those who nominated them. I think that is the core issue that has led to this kind of discussion, even outside of the law.
Mhm.
And the first point I therefore want to make is that commissioners are appointed under the Constitution by the president after a nomination process. And as of 1992, until the present time, there has been no changing of the guard at the level of the commissions, though there has been many changing of the guard at the level of the parliament in terms of who's in opposition, who's in government, who's the opposition leader, who is the president. That has had many changes. But those changes have in no way, over the 18 years and more than the 18 years that I've been there for, affected the composition of the commission. And I would argue that the reason why that has occurred is because although the political actors are involved in the establishment, in the constituting of the commission, that once the commission is constituted, those persons are not representatives of those political actors. And they are merely persons who are considered to be sufficiently competent and of integrity to conduct the affairs of the nation from the electoral perspective. And so when one turns to the law, one sees what the law has to say. In that regard, one has to look at Article 161 of the Constitution, which specifies, in addition to the chairman, there shall be 6 members of the commission who shall be appointed in the following manner. 3 members to be appointed by the president, acting in his or her own deliberate judgment. 3 members to be appointed by the president, and please note that in both instances, the appointments are being done by the president, acting in accordance with the advice of the leader of the opposition, tendered after meaningful consultation with the non-governmental political parties represented in the National Assembly. So here, what we see is persons being appointed. What is important to note is that this provision is quite different from the provision in relation to other commissions. And that difference is important. And so I want to use the Ethnic Commission as the example. In the case of the Ethnic Commission, it says how the members will be appointed, but it goes on to specify that those persons who are appointed shall serve for a term, so that unlike the Elections Commission, other commissions, and I've given the example of the Ethnic Commission, specifies that there is a term that those appointees will serve. The Elections Commission does not specify that there's a term. Another element that's also important to note is that in the other commission, some of the persons are stated to be representatives and not mere nominees. So one would assume that if the body who they're representing changes, then the representatives too have to change. Also, it should be noted that in the Constitution, in Article 225, there it specifies how persons from commissions can be removed. And that is the only reference in the Constitution to the removal of commissioners from the Elections Commission. Unlike the other instances where those persons have a term, and once the term expires, then they are removed. So from a simple reading of the Constitution, and our Constitution has a way in which the first way it's to be interpreted is the literal reading of the Constitution. What do the words mean? And none of the words there suggest in any form or fashion that there's a term limit. People go on to try to have what may be called contextual and historical interpretations. But even in that context of a historical and contextual interpretation, the question may arise: are commissioners intended to be partisan? And if they are not intended to be partisan, that may well be the reason why they are insulated from political involvement once they're appointed. And that insulation is that they cannot be removed by political actors. The idea being that their responsibility is to ensure that elections are conducted in a non-partisan manner, and for them not to be under the influence of politicians. And therefore, like in the instance of the United States Supreme Court, though presidents appoint judges, a change of a president does not result in new judges being appointed.
Yes.
Because
Right.
what you're really doing is insulating the appointee, though there's a relationship with the political parties, and in Ghana's case, it's not an appointment, it's a nomination. You insulate them from the political forces once they constitute that body, which should not be a body that is partisan in any manner and exhibits a partisan relationship. The fact, however, is in Guyana, because of the political culture of the country and the parties, we have a circumstance where our commissioners are not always manifestly non-partisan. And so that meshes with this desire of new political leaders to have their people in there because they're seeing a body that in fact is not necessarily non-partisan. And so they're saying, look, if this body is not non-partisan, then let our people be there. So they're dealing with what has turned out to be in many regards a de facto situation as opposed to a de jure situation. But these things really rest in law. And given the fact that there is the possibility of an interpretation really beyond the constructive literary interpretation, where there may be a judicial interpretation, then one would have to concede that the judiciary should, in the circumstance of the contestation, be given an opportunity to render the judicial interpretation, since they're the custodians of our law and can look at the Constitution and all of the circumstances, historical, contextual, and otherwise, and make that determination. It would hardly be presumptuous for anyone else other than that body of people to attempt to give an interpretation.
Vincent Alexander, yes. Vincent, you know the logic of what is being said. Are you hearing me, Vincent?
Yes, quite clear.
Yeah, the logic of what is being said is that you have a change in the status quo on one side of the political divide. And so therefore, the GCOM must reflect that change. Now, if you go back to 2011, there was a change in the status quo in the sense that in 2011, after that election, what we had was a minority government, all right? And you come to 2015, you had a change in government. What was then opposition became government, and what was government became opposition. You had a change in opposition leader. Granger was the opposition before the 2015 election. And now after the election, we have Mr. Jagdeo. Did we ask Mr. Jagdeo, since you are the new opposition leader, do you change the commissioners? No, that didn't happen. In 2020, Jagdeo and his party became government, and the APNU had a new opposition leader in Joe Harmon. Did we ask Joe Harmon to name new commissioners? No. Come 2025, we have a change in the opposition leader again, who is now Mohammed, but we are now saying Mohammed should get his commissioners. There's some inconsistency there. Talk to us.
You see, my argument, as I attempted to lay out earlier, is once the commissioners are appointed,
yes,
they are no longer relating to a party, though the party may have been involved in nominating them. That's a mechanism for their identification. It is not what determines the nature of their operation. And it's the nature of the operation that suggests that I could have become a commissioner in 2007. You had a change of leader of the opposition in 2011 between Corbyn and Granger. And Granger was given no opportunity to select, nominate commissioners. Even prior to 2011, there was one time when Corbyn publicly called for my resignation.
That's right.
And in doing so, he accepted that he could not effect a change. 2011 came along, change of opposition leader, and we continued. 2015 came along, and a complete reversal. And here were we, originally nominees of the leader of the opposition, sitting, being referred to as nominees of the government, when the government never had a chance to make that nomination. So there is a clear point of disconnect. Once the commissioners are appointed, it takes on a different relationship with those parties. And so whether you call a nominee of the commissioner of the president or a nominee of the opposition, that's amorphous. That becomes irrelevant for all intents and purposes. But let me go on to specify that from a legal perspective, that is irrelevant. But in Guyana, given our political culture, from a de facto perspective, this problem could exist. This problem could exist. But de facto is not the law. De facto is not the law. But what one probably needs to do in such circumstances is to be responsive to what's de facto, not by changing commissioners, but by addressing the law. Because law has a way of having a pull and push effect. Pull and push effect. And so if the de facto is pulling in a particular direction, then you should de jure deal with that question. And so for me, the problem we are faced with is a problem of looking at the law and making a determination as to whether we want commissioners who are not de facto partisan, and to coin the law in a manner that makes it clear that there is no de facto partisan existence of commissioners, or to enshrine in the law a de facto, de jure existence of partisan commissioners. So what I'm saying, in other words, at this moment, really what should be occurring is redressing the law, its intent, and its operation, rather than having a 6 for a 6, and I may even say a 6 for a 9. 6 for a 9 meaning that the law tries to get non-partisan commissioners, and you are going to be consciously now saying, though the law says that, let us operate on a partisan basis, and therefore we may get commissioners who won't even pretend to be non-partisan, like some already do, and have a 6 for a 9 rather than a 6 for a 6.
For 6, I like that formulation. Vincent Alexander, good evening to you, Beverly Fraser. Good evening to you, Brother Asquith. Welcome to Politics 101 as we are winding down here. Vincent, the chairman of the commission, has inserted herself in the discourse to the point where she's holding up the work of GCOM. You have taken umbrage to that, and you have written her. I think she replied once. Where are the state of things there at GCOM?
Let me say this. I don't think that the chairperson necessarily inserted herself. I described GCOM being in a state of comatose.
Okay.
After the 6th of September. And this was comatose induced by the chairperson. On the 6th of September, the night, at 11:30 meeting, the chairperson brought to the commission the results for the general election. Listen to me carefully. She did not bring the results for the regional election. She only brought the results for the national election. Those were shared with us, and you were asked to give our fiat. 3 commissioners declined from giving a fiat on the contention that those results were results of a flawed system and therefore could not be embraced. 3 commissioners and the chairperson gave the fiat, hence by majority, those became the results. The law goes on to say that there should be a public declaration of the results. The chairperson, having gotten the fiat, did not move on to a declaration, much less a public declaration. And we fell silent. Could be for 2 reasons. One, where is the declaration? And 2, where are the regional results? One commissioner then says, Madam Chair, shouldn't this meeting stand adjourned? We're done with the business of the night. We then responded by saying, how is it we're done with the business of the night? There has been no declaration. We have been afforded the results that the Constitution provides for. In fact, the representation the People's Act provides for under Section 96. But there's been no declaration. So that this meeting can't be adjourned, business is incomplete. The chairperson had no written declaration. She had a spreadsheet of the results. Under protestation, she murmured stutteringly a declaration. After that, I asked her for a copy, a written copy of that declaration. We never got that. Nor has there ever been a public declaration as is specified. Because the law says We must get this report. It must be the basis for a public declaration and the gazetting. The results have been gazetted, but that prerequisite was never done. And that's for the national elections, general elections. For the regional elections to date, they have never been presented to the commission. There's been no public declaration, but they've been gazetted. That's the first point I want to make. And I want to make that point that when we wrote to the commission, to the chairperson, we wrote saying, there's some things you should have done you haven't done. If there had been a meeting, these things might have been done. We never called for a meeting. She's put it out there as if we called for a meeting. We didn't call for a meeting. We said, look, you are in default. You haven't done these things. And her response was to ignore those contentions and to simply say that the commission is not constituted and that she's waiting for it to be constituted whether the parliament meets. Now, the things which she did not do are unrelated to the argument of the commission not being constituted, because those things should have been done with the commission in situ for the purpose of receiving the results, giving the fiat, her making a public declaration, and then being gazetted. She could then raise that question after gazetting. The question is irrelevant, impossible before the results being gazetted. We would have, in any circumstance, been in situ up to the point of the results being gazetted. So in some regards, what she's done is to attempt not to respond to the area in which she's been irresponsible, in the area in which there's been dereliction of duty, by raising the question of the commission not being properly constituted. And she only spoke to that issue after my second letter. Her first letter didn't speak to the issues that I've raised, and she only spoke to the issues publicly when the press approached her. She did not volunteer to speak to those issues. The press approached her after my second correspondence, in which I said, look, you haven't answered my questions. And then I spoke to the issue that she sought to raise about the commission being constituted. Then is when she went into this tirade that she knows the law and all of that, and in fact has misinformed herself. She contended that she knows about the intention of the law because she was working with Shahabadin when this law was coined. Balgadash, this law was coined in 1991 for the 1992 elections and was enshrined in the Constitution, if I'm not mistaken, in 1997. Shahabadin nor Qadat Singh was nowhere near that process.
That's right.
And she tells the public that we must believe her because she has intimate knowledge of when this occurred. And her intimate knowledge is about the 1980 Constitution.
That's right.
I don't know what's the real state of mind that has caused her to attempt to tell the public that. Secondly, if she's arguing that we are no longer commissioners because there's a change, or there will be a change, because there's been no changes yet, of the leader of the opposition, then that applies to her as well, because she came to that office through a similar process, a process of nomination by the leader of the opposition and appointment by the president. It is difficult to understand what has informed her disposition and her action in particular, because even if she has a view, the chairperson of GCOM has absolutely no jurisdiction for an interpretation of the constitution of a body which she simply chairs. And so she's usurped the authority of those who are authorized. So don't have to contest. I don't have to contest the correctness of what she said. I contest the rightness of her being able to say what she has said, even as I concede that none of us can question the court if it is called upon to give an interpretation.
Vincent Alexander, laying it out here tonight, and you're acknowledging, those of you in the audience are acknowledged, as the brother is saying, in facts, Vincent, facts, facts, facts. And that is, as I said last night when I talked about tonight's program, Vincent Alexander does analysis, but he's a man that presents. Good evening to you, Rhonda Lane. I haven't seen or heard from you in a little while. Are you still in Guyana, Rhonda? Good evening. Vincent, I saw a letter that was released this afternoon. I suppose we're going to see it in the media tomorrow. But it was written by yourself and your brother Commissioner Desmond Trotman. And you seem to be drawing some parallels with what has transpired this past week in relation to the Chancellor of the Judiciary, acting Chancellor of the Judiciary, now retired Chancellor of the Judiciary, and the kind of political gymnastics that's right there. Talk to us about what you're arguing in that letter.
The argument in the letter is that our democracy has been trampled upon, and these occurrences clearly show that there are persons who are not acting in consonance with what our Constitution provides for. The question of the Chancellor of the Judiciary, there are many, many unanswered questions. Many, many unanswered questions. We don't know that the instrument that appointed that lady provided for her when she goes on leave not to return to that office. There seems to be a contention that that's the case. If you read the letter carefully, you will see I make a differentiation between the acting chancellor and the chancellor acting.
Yes.
The acting chancellor is a substantive position. The chancellor acting is somebody who is acting when the substantive holder of the office is on leave. The substantive holder of the office, as far as I'm concerned, could only have been the acting chancellor. And therefore, there's no basis for saying to the acting chancellor, you are on leave, and that leave relieved you of your substantive position. And in that context, she should have been returning, as she did in fact do, to her post. We mustn't lose sight of that. She returned to her post. This is a lady of the law. She returned to her post. The chancellor acting, substantive acting chief justice, returned to her post as well. So you can see these two law officers acted in consonance with their understanding of the law. However, the Chief Justice acting refused to return to his post and seemed to have prior knowledge of what was intended. Seemed to have prior knowledge. And what turned out to be a clumsy act, because they didn't get the lady before and try to shut her off. They allowed her to come back, take up her position, and then carry out this clumsy, unconstitutional, and illegal act. Now, it may be argued, well, how is it illegal? She is asked for early retirement. The lady has done what allows her to go peacefully, without being in any sort of conflict and tug of war about the office. And one can only conclude that her status of pre-retirement leave is the way she found it necessary not to become embroiled in this political situation and to leave peacefully rather than to be a football in the political arena that has unfolded. So our
Well,
democracy is being threatened,
yes.
not by actions. And I let us start to say that what we are experiencing is a regime that is not committed to democracy. They're committed to something called democratic centralism, but they spout democracy for the purposes of local and international acceptance, when in fact they are not committed to democracy, and therefore really, notwithstanding being elected, poses a real question about their legitimacy.
Vincent Alexander here, weighing in on the recent resignation of the substantive acting Chief Justice Yonette Cummins Edwards. As we have said here on this program, it's not retirement. She was shoved out. Vincent, thank you very much for coming on tonight and really bringing clarity to a number of issues. I shall, of course, see you shortly as we continue to deal with issues. Monday is going to be Parliament. There'll be a new opposition leader, and we shall see what Madam Chair at GCOM does after that. I will see you when we are ready to take another look at this issue and other issues. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Vincent Alexander, chairman of GCOM, chairman of ITPADG. We didn't get tonight to talk about ITPADG. When Vincent comes back, maybe next week, we'll get into some of that discussion. I want to thank all of you for coming out again tonight as we continue to struggle, as we continue to engage the issues of our time, as we continue to involve you in the discussion and to break down some of these issues for you. We continue to stand firm. Stand firm because if we don't stand firm, they will herd us back into the plantation. We're not going back there. We're not going back there. And we are going to fight it out as we have always done. As I've said to my brothers and sisters who have voted in non-traditional ways, some of us in these last elections, the vote is a collective instrument that you use individually. And so you want to be very careful about how you use that vote. Again, I said the vote is a collective instrument that you use individually. It's not an altogether individual instrument. We got that vote as a collective, not as individual. They didn't call John Tom in 1966 and said, here is the right to vote, and then call Vincent Alexander in 1967 and say, here's the right. They gave us the right to vote as a collective. And we can exercise it individually. But always know there may be unintended consequence of that individual exercise. One thing is clear is that African Guyanese, for the most part, said, we don't want the PPP. You do that by your vote. But your vote also brought some unintended consequences. I've said, just look at who is the head of the cabinet, of the executive government. Just look at who is the head of the legislative branch. Just look at what has happened in the judicial branch. They've gotten rid of one head of that branch to bring in a head of another head who is favorable to them. Look and see who's head of the army. Look and see what's happening in the police force. Although the head of the police force is African, look at the officers. Look at how many commanders are not African. The majority of the commanders are non-African. Look at who is the opposition leader. Look at what's happening in the trade unions. Whatever youth may think, in a plural society, a multi-ethnic society like ours, all the ethnic groups want to feel that the face of the country reflects them in part. Our Amerindian brothers and sisters, when they look at the face of Guyana, they don't see themselves. And African Guyanese, when they look at the face of Guyana, are surely seeing less and less of themselves. That is not the way a plural society operates. Symbolism is as important as substance. Symbolism sometimes flows from substance. And so I'm saying to you, my African Guyanese brothers and sisters, watch how you move in the future. Watch how you move in the future. There is individual liberty. Each of us is entitled to liberty, the right to free speech, the right to freedom of religion, the right of assembly. Those are liberties. But rights are collective. That's why we talk about human rights. We talk about civil rights. Civil liberties are mostly individual. Civil rights is about rights that each group has. And when we talk about violation of civil rights, we are saying there are rights that others enjoy and others don't enjoy. Civil rights, human rights are collective constructs. Liberties are individual. And with that vote in your hand, you have the liberty to use it in a certain way. But when other people are telling you to use it to split up yourself, while they are using it to bring themselves together and lock together, they're locking together and they're telling you, divide yourself. You get in play. You get in play. And some of us allowed ourselves to be played, not because we go and put that vote and say, I want to be played. But the consequence of that vote is that you get played. As you all know, I talk it black. Black man, watch yourself. Black man, black woman, you're destroying your strength. Your strength is not just in your numbers, but is how you make those numbers work for you as the collective. Black man, watch yourself. $40 up front, $40,000 up front, and $500,000 after you choose $40,000 up front. Black man, watch yourself. Watch yourself. You are getting played. Not because you say, I want to be played, but because you give the impression that you are prime targets to be played. And they're playing you. Black man, watch yourself. You got to buy a cell phone. You're a police. You quarrel over the cell phone and you get shot. Boom! Black man, watch yourself. And the man who shot you, boom, and get charged for murdering you. He get charged for manslaughter, but more than that, he out on bail for $1 million. And he could afford the bail. Black man, watch yourself. If you were put on $1 million bail, you're gone to jail. If you did shoot that man, black man, you ain't getting no bail. Black man, if you had shot that man, you would have been charged for murder. Black man, watch yourself. You vote for change, and you're still getting shoot. Boom! Because you get a quarrel over cell phone. A man who picks up a gun and shoot another man over a little quarrel, in the first place, does not value the life of that other man. No value is placed on that. Boom! You charge me and you put me on $1 million bail. Black man, watch yourself. Black woman, you all watch. This country is not a place when it comes to black people. I'm your poor, humble brother. Just using the little voice that I have, or the microphone, or as Rathram Turan said, my megaphone, and sung in the word to you all. I love you all, but watch yourself. You all not behaving like you all like yourself. Watch the face of Guyana. Watch the face of Guyana. Watch the face of Guyana. Black man, black woman, you're expendable. A man, according to the police, coming from another country Sunday morning, and he gone plant a bomb at a gas station. Who got killed? Your little black daughter, your little black sister. If that little black brother and that little black sister want to the lady who pumping the gas, she would have get killed. Black man, watch yourself. You're always in danger. They pay for your funeral, black man, black woman. But when you were alive, they kill you. I am saying the man who blew up the gas station set out to say, I'm going to blow up a 6-year-old child. But black man, black woman, you're always in the path of danger. All I have is my voice. All I have is my love for you all. But are you taking ram goat advice and landing your entire group in trouble? The one office you had was the leader of the opposition. If you didn't win the government, you had the leader of the opposition. You could say no to the commissioner. You could say no to who they want for Chief Justice. You could say no to who they want for Chancellor. You could say no to many things. With the leader, you all take it away from a black man. Take it away. With your vote. I don't believe when you all went into that ballot box, some of you all. Well, I'm not talking to you all, because I don't think many of you all or any of you all, but those who went into the ballot box and didn't vote APNU, you didn't say, I want to take away the leader of the opposition from an African. You didn't say that. But that is what your vote eventually did. You don't even have the power now to say no. You don't even have the power to say no. You take that away with your vote from your black brother and your black sister. Your counterparts, your brothers and sisters on the East Indian side were very clear with their vote. Some of them hate the PPP. Some of them believe the PPP is no good. But they didn't take away the power from the PPP. Black man, where is your God? What is your God telling you? Or you better repair it as quickly as possible and stop this nonsense. You take away the power to say no, a limited power to say no. Now the PPP could nominate who they want to nominate. You got 3 brothers who look like you on a 7-member commission, and by your vote, you make them now chorusing that them brothers must go. Black man, black woman, your foreparents didn't die, didn't struggle, didn't sacrifice for you all to do what you all have done. Again, I ain't saying you all intentionally do it, but if you all did throw back and reflect a little bit, you would know that, boy, if me go there and me do that, this is going to be the outcome. Crying and bawling, no. The deed is already done. Especially since you partner them on the other side. You know, I got to listen to some of the things. That times, what black people so stupid. That times, you know, we now know why you've been doing that. You're trying with them. But you're trying with them. We have to endure the ridicule of you. This is not about Muhammad. Muhammad gonna be all right. Muhammad gonna be all right. Wherever he go, he's gonna be all right. You are not going to be all right. You're not going to be all right. By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down and where we wept when we remembered Zion. How can we sing a freedom song in a strange land? You all have made Guyana a stranger land for black people. Correct yourself. I may be speaking to the choir here, but by time tonight, those who not in the choir gonna be hearing my words. Catch yourself. Catch yourself. Or else Crapo will continue to smoke at your pipe. And you all deserve better than that. Again, until tomorrow night. And I ain't done it. Because as the young people saying, you know you're able. I know I'm able.